The chains bit into my wrists, and the cavern smelled of damp stone and cheap torch smoke. Around us a crowd pressed in, half human, half alien, their faces bright with schadenfreude and bored cruelty. They'd come to watch a spectacle, a human and a foreign beast, bound and displayed. They expected fear and pleading. What they got was a quiet that felt like a held breath. Beside me, the alien did not flinch. Its skin shimmered with colors that didn't exist on my world. Its eyes glowed with an inner light that made the torches look pale. There was a weight to its presence that steadied me. When the guards shoved a mockery of a smile across their faces and a man spat, "They are worthless," the alien tilted its head as if the insult were a curious insect. It didn't understand words, but it understood intent. I felt its heartbeat through the chain, slow, steady, defiant, and something in me answered in kind. I had not come here to die. I had been scavenging on the border of the Vera forest for my people when soldiers seized anyone who wandered too close to the forbidden zones. I'd assumed the alien was another prisoner to be ignored. When our eyes met across the holding pen, though, I realized how badly I'd misread the situation. We were not broken. We were waiting. Time lost meaning. Minutes might have been hours. Pain existed as a dull white background to sharper things: shame, fear, resolve. The alien leaned close enough that I could see bioluminescent veins under its skin ripple like tide lines. It placed a clawed hand near my shoulder without touching, not as threat, but as promise. Courage, I realized, does not always roar. Sometimes it is a whisper shared in the dark. Then the guards tightened formation and stepped forward. Weapons clicked. Expectation rippled through the crowd. The alien coiled, muscles folding like a spring. It did not strike. It waited. I raised my head, tasted blood and iron and the wet tang of fear, and I spoke. "We will not break for your amusement," I said. My voice was small and cold. "We will not kneel to your fear." The sound ricocheted through the cavern. A few laughed nervously, more paused. The alien gave a low, resonant sound that matched my words, not in language, but in purpose. In that instant, something changed. The spectators began to see not captives, but a pair choosing to stand. Fear can be contagious. The crowd's mood shifted from hungry amusement to confused unease, the first dangerous thing we noticed. The alien beside me tested the chain with a soft scrape of its claws. I matched it in posture. Our breaths found a rhythm together, an unspoken plan forming in the space between heartbeats. Some guards grew impatient. A shove toward the execution platform was meant to humiliate, to break spirit. I braced. When the metal bit into my skin, I focused on something else: small movements, timing, angles. The alien mirrored me as if it had learned these counters over many battles. The guards counted on spectacle. They did not expect coordination. I leaned toward the alien and risked a whisper, an attempt at a shared idea. Act together, trust instinct. Its eyes flashed brighter, a light like a struck flint. It understood. At the next shift, the alien slammed against its chain with force that made the iron scream. I followed. Momentum jolted the lower fittings loose. The chains grazed the floor with a metallic clamor that startled the cavern. For a heartbeat, the crowd surged, some in delight, some in alarm, and the guards fumbled for control. We did not flee blindly. We stood. When the first guard lunged, the alien moved with a speed that belied its size, knocking the weapon free with a graceful sweep and disarming him without fatality. I disabled another with a practiced twist, a civilian scavenger's skill turned to necessity. We did not fight to slaughter, we fought to stop being toys. The crowd's laughter dissolved into a thicket of murmurs and gasps. Faces that had sneered now registered doubt. People stepped back. A few pressed forward, curiosity mixing with fear. The alien and I were no longer exhibits. We had become an example. Courage claimed in public changes how others understand power. When the last guard stuttered and stilled, we did not gloat. We let our presence speak. We walked, slow, deliberate, toward the cavern exit. The crowd parted not from kindness, but from recognition. This was more than a spectacle. It was a demonstration of an idea that men and aliens alike could not unsee. Once outside the cavern, the night hit us with cold truth. The world beyond was vast, dangerous, and indifferent. But where the cavern ringed us with jeers, the wild opened as possibility. The alien and I paused beneath a sky cut by unfamiliar constellations, And for the first time in months, I could feel something like breath again that wasn't a survival reflex. We did not speak the same language. Its vocalizations were low and resonant, like wind through pipe, and its gestures held meanings I had to learn by seeing, not hearing. Still, understanding crept between us in a way words could not manufacture. A small nod, the way it turned its head toward a ridge, the way it shifted weight when a nocturnal predator passed. These were sentences. Trust grew not by proclamation but by tiny, repeated confirmations. You move left, I move right. You take the lead here, I will cover there. That trust became practical. We crossed rivers on narrow stones, climbed ridges where loose crystal threatened to give, and navigated forests whose leaves glowed faintly in the dark. Sometimes we crawled through mud, and sometimes we ran, always with the same rhythm. We watched, then we moved. At dusk, the alien would teach me which mushrooms were safe, and I would show it how to read the wind for an approaching storm. Little lessons that saved breaths and lives accrued into something larger, competence together. As days lengthened, the chirp of distant conflict became clearer. The world we stepped into was not merely hostile because of nature. Men and aliens had built hierarchies that bled into violence. The crowd's cruelty was not unique. Prejudice had many faces, and often it wore uniforms. But the union between me and the alien became its own answer. We were proof you could form a coalition across species not out of contract or convenience, but out of choice. Companions we were, allies by act and promise. We traded silence and strategy, and in the quiet, I learned to rely on its instincts as much as my own training. Survival, but better, meaning. At the edge of a high ridge, before the valley that would demand everything of us, the alien extended a hand in a gesture that felt like an offer and a pact. I clasped it. Together we would move forward. Dawn came like an answer. Thin, steady light that painted the forest in pale gold. Standing at the horizon, I felt something close to hope that had little to do with optimism and more to do with capacity. The sense that we could act and survive rather than merely endure. News travels oddly fast across scattered settlements. Our escape became a story at hearths and in the corridors of supply depots. People spoke of the human and the alien who had broken free together, and the tale changed with each telling. Sometimes heroic, sometimes dangerous, but never inconsequential. In marketplaces and in taverns, whispers of our defiance threaded into larger conversations about hierarchy, law, and who had the right to determine the fate of others. We moved on, but the world had shifted as we crossed it. Where people saw novelty, they paused. Where they had intended mockery, they paused again. Some followed us, refugees, curious traders, the tired and the ready. Not because we demanded followers, but because our choice to stand had signaled that another path was possible. The alien and I did not romanticize our journey. There were losses and wounds, nights of hunger and days of hard decisions. But each hardship taught us the same lesson. Respect becomes currency in uncertain times. We exchanged knowledge, star maps for local lore, survival techniques for political caution. We began to see how systems of oppression worked, not as abstract theories, but as coordinated acts that convinced people to look away. At the ridge's edge, we paused to listen to the world breathe. The alien's eyes reflected the sunrise. I felt gratitude and an odd, honest pride. This alliance had started as a whisper in chains, and now carried a weight no one could ignore. The crowd in the cavern would keep its memory, and those who had watched would have to reckon with a story that made them uncomfortable. Courage is contagious. We walked on, not because we believed the world would change overnight, but because we understood that change begins with small, stubborn acts. The chains were gone. The lesson remained. Together we had chosen courage. Together we would keep choosing it.